Hey everyone, welcome back. Donald Trump just made a fairly bold campaign promise. He said that on the first day of his administration, should he win the 2024 presidential election, of course, that he will abolish birthright citizenship as we know it. Now, this could be difficult for him, as birthright citizenship is enshrined in the 14th Amendment, specifically Section 1. So, he would have to amend the Constitution, and frankly, given how the amendment process works, I just don't think the support is out there for the kind of amendment that he would want. However, it does seem that Trump and his advisors do have a plan to circumvent the amendment process. So in this video, I'm going to do a quick overview of Section 1 of the 14th Amendment, do a little history and kind of how it works, and then we'll talk about how Donald Trump is going to try and change the 14th Amendment without actually amending it. So let's start off with going over the relevant text from Section 1 of the 14th Amendment, which says, "All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside." Pretty straightforward for the Constitution, not a lot of room for interpretation there. It essentially says that if you are born within the territorial boundary of the United States and are subject to its laws, congratulations, you are a citizen. Notable exemptions are, of course, if you are the child of a foreign diplomat, as foreign diplomats are subject to diplomatic immunity and are not under the jurisdiction of the United States, and certain Native American tribes who have arranged treaties with the United States government that, while they are within the confines of the United States, they are not under the same jurisdiction as ordinary citizens. Initially, this section of the 14th Amendment was designed to deal with the aftermath of the Civil War and the abolition of slavery, as it is one of the 3 Reconstruction Amendments. The section on birthright citizenship was specifically designed to address the question of whether all of these newly freed slaves were entitled to citizenship. Previously, the Dred Scott ruling has said that no, they weren't entitled to citizenship, and the only way for Congress to change a Supreme Court ruling is to amend the Constitution. So they did. But when you think about it, this is probably how it should have been in the first place. America has always been a nation of immigrants, and the naturalization process can be a long one, depending on what time you actually look at the process for naturalization. Meanwhile, people are coming, they're working here, and raising families. And it's a bit of an awkward situation when you're born in a country, you've never known any other home, but you're not allowed to be a citizen of that country. And that's why birthright citizenship has always been an important part of the American immigrant experience. It allows those sons and daughters of immigrants to ingrain themselves in their new home and fully participate in its civic processes. And there has been some evidence in other countries that have since liberalized their immigration and citizenship processes that show that when you allow for expanded birthright citizenship, the children of immigrants integrate better into the country that they have found themselves in. So it just makes sense. If you're born here, and this is where you're going to live your life, you should be a citizen. Now, there are some opponents of universal birthright citizenship that argue that the phrase "subject to the jurisdiction of the United States" is open to interpretation, but it's really not. It's a fairly straightforward phrase. If you are subject to the jurisdiction of a nation, it just means that you are within their borders, and they can arrest you for violating their laws without having to confer with another country. That's why the children of diplomats have an exemption, because diplomats are subject to diplomatic immunity, therefore they can't be arrested. They're not under the jurisdiction of the U.S. But everybody else? Yeah, as long as you're within the U.S.'s territory and you can be arrested by the U.S. government, you're subject to its jurisdiction. So there really isn't a lot of room for argument when it comes to this phrase. So what does Donald Trump want to change, and how does he think he's going to change it? Well, the simple part is what he wants to change. He basically wants to make it so that the children of illegal immigrants are not entitled to birthright citizenship. Again, it runs against a long line of historical precedent and the general concept of the immigrant experience in the U.S., because our modern concept of legal immigration is relatively new. But that is a whole nother story that we could try and unbox, as there's a lot there. But what's more interesting is the mechanism by which he wants to execute that change. Now, of course, he could do it the proper way, which is to go through the constitutional amendment process. But that would require 2/3 of both houses of Congress, as well as the approval of 3/4 of the state. And I promise you, the math is not there for any such amendment. So, actually doing things the legitimate way is out. So how's Donald Trump going to do it? Well, him and his advisors want to exploit the fact that some people have argued that there is a little wiggle room in that jurisdiction clause. And Donald Trump plans to essentially sign an executive order saying, oh, we've been misinterpreting the Constitution, it doesn't apply to the children of illegal immigrants. Then, of course, someone would sue him as saying, no, that's a violation of the 14th Amendment, and it would make its way through the courts up to the Supreme Court. And the gamble here is the same gamble they took with Roe v. Wade, that the conservative majority on the court would then adopt whatever interpretation it is that Donald Trump and his advisors want. Now, would that work? Exceptional question. Given what happened with Roe v. Wade, I can't promise anything for sure, but given that this relies on a much older precedent and has a lot of historical significance, I could see where the justices would be a little bit more uncomfortable changing that interpretation, as, again, as we talked about earlier in this video, being born in the US, very straightforward. Being subject to its laws, very straightforward. So, there's really not the wiggle room that some people claim there is. Now, is this going to end up being one of Donald Trump's many outrageous campaign promises that he doesn't end up following through on? Perhaps. If he does follow through on it, is it likely to succeed? Absolutely not. But I can see a future where this policy concept becomes a central part of the Republican Party's policy platform, as they are shifting more and more in an anti-immigrant direction. So, as we go forward into 2024 and beyond, we're going to have to keep an eye on Republican views on this particular topic and see what other ways that they come up with to deprive people of possible pathways to citizenship. Think about it.